Hello, I'm Wendy Wilson, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Realizing Potential. I'm excited about today's guest. I've probably known her about 5 or 6 years. We met at a conference and immediately hit it off. But what I have been most proud of and pleased with, we actually share the same role and position. She is Chief of Staff at Arizona State, and of course, much larger institution. And so she's not, as I report to the president, to the university president. I believe Rae reports to the provost, but she'll tell us a little bit more about that. And she is none other than Miss Rae Borden, Dr. Rae Borden. I apologize. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you, Wendy. This is a great honor and opportunity to talk with you in more detail about what I do here at Arizona State.
Yes.
It's a new position and role where I am. I work in the Knowledge Enterprise at ASU. I am Chief of Staff there, and Knowledge Enterprise is responsible ultimately for the research ecosystem of Arizona State University, which includes corporate engagement and partnerships, international development, general research administration. It's quite vast.
Yeah.
how they define the research ecosystem here at ASU.
A super broad portfolio. Love that, we have so many things in common, certainly the ASU when the chief of staff. Yeah. And so I was so excited that when you communicated that you were entering into this new role. But before you tell us a little bit more about that and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, let's go back. I'd love for you to share with our viewers a little bit of your career history, where you did your earned your degrees from, and I know you had a brief period of time at a beloved sister HBCU. So share with the viewers a little bit about your background.
So I actually got into higher ed administration quite by accident. Around 5 years after I finished my undergraduate degree from Southeastern Louisiana University, I decided to leave my beloved hometown of New Orleans and venture out to Atlanta. At the time, my mom was living there, and I had a couple of other relatives that had settled there. So it was far enough away from New Orleans, but close enough that I felt that I'd be comfortable there and starting on a new path and a new journey career-wise. And my first position there was as an executive assistant in the Graduate Institute of Liberal Arts at Emory University. So that was my first foray kind of into higher ed, and I loved it so much. I loved the opportunity to work with students. I loved being in an environment where I felt that I was going to be surrounded by people from whom I could learn something from every day, as well as be a contributor to the conversation around higher ed and educating our students. And so it just kind of, my love for higher ed just blossomed from there. And after I left Emory, I went into a position with the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, which I'm sure you're very fond of.
Yes.
That's the accrediting agency. And I ended up being there for about 12 years, working in different capacity, working with different vice presidents there and supporting a number of their initiatives, which at the time when I first got there, they were just transitioning to what is now their current standards for accreditation. After that, I spent some time working as the administrative director to the provost at Georgia State University in Atlanta, which I absolutely enjoyed because it gave me the opportunity to kind of see the flip side of the coin from the work that I had been doing at Sachs. From there, I went to the sister institution that you mentioned, Xavier University of Louisiana in New Orleans, which was also a fantastic experience, particularly challenging. I learned a tremendous amount from the president and chief of staff there. in my role as Deputy Chief of Staff and Associate Vice President of Strategy and Planning. It was a very interesting time, that we were in because of the pandemic and all of the challenges associated with that, and just generally learning the culture of HBCUs, how much they actually do with such limited resources. It's really, really a remarkable place. Xavier was a very remarkable place and a great opportunity. And then I took a plunge and totally shifted back into public institutions, working at Arizona State. And it's been, I think it's been interesting. It's been challenging, but really, I feel that every position in which I've served have really served as great opportunities for my development as a higher ed leader, also just as a person and as someone who really cares about the future of education, as I said, particularly for our students.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. You have what I love about your background. You took incremental steps, but all of it seems like it certainly aligns with where you are and where I know your whatever the future brings for you, whatever institution or whatever role. I know you're going to be a success, but you're the type of professional that is always going to take a 360 view of what's going on, how you are performing, what your contributions are, where you possibly need to recalibrate, and just maintaining a good pulse of what's going on and how you can factor in with the continued advancement. So I've always admired and respected that about you. I love what you also alluded to, and I would like to, briefly talk about that, your thoughts in terms of the entire higher ed landscape. You certainly have had the privilege of working for private institutions, public institutions, institutions with very unique and distinct missions. But after, the last 2 to 3 years, when the world flipped upside down, it has had certainly, a huge impact on post-secondary education and what the next steps are. What are you doing as a professional to ensure that your contributions are impactful? And how have you been able to make the adjustment considering what has happened in the last 2 to 3 years?
So one of the things that has been important to my development is to always stay on top of what's trending in higher ed, to stay knowledgeable about that and aware of what's going on in your surroundings so that you can position yourself to be a force, whether that's in front of the scene as an administrator and the person who always has to be out front in the media and the public eye speaking to the issues, or whether that's behind the scenes, which honestly, that's kind of my lane. I prefer to be a behind the scenes force, but just staying aware, continuously developing myself, being comfortable with stepping outside of my comfort zone to learn and grow my portfolio and my understanding and my compassion for the experiences of others is also really, really important to my development and how I move, so to speak, throughout my career and in my interactions with others. And continuously growing my network, I would say, also is a huge part of being able to be impactful. Because as a chief of staff, it's really important for you to build those relationships, because it's through those relationships that you receive information that you'll need in order to be an effective chief of staff. And so that's something I'm very, very cognizant of. And it's something I've had to be aware of as I've moved into all of these different positions. And they all challenge you in different ways. So it's also about your temperament and the things that you love as well. what I like the most about my job is just the variety. Every day is something, brings something different, a new challenge, a new opportunity. So my mindset is one that allows me to kind of stay focused on ultimately what it is that I want to do, the person that I want to be as a professional, and just as Rae, the individual. And I like having balance. So as long as those things kind of coalesce and I stay in a good state, take care of myself, and just my general well-being, I think that those are all key in order to being successful here.
Well, thank you for reminding me of the balance piece. That's just so important, and we know
Yes.
that. But it is a conscious decision and acts that you have to perform on a daily basis. And I really hone in on the word of conscious, because you have to keep it at the forefront of your thoughts and be very intentional with that. When you were speaking of your role, and I remember when you first started officially there in the role of chief of staff, and we had the conversation of now what should I expect, and I think you've already figured it out. I was reminded of one of my favorite professional texts. It's Career Warfare, and there's a whole chapter dedicated to being a rainmaker. And
Yes.
that's really what you have to do in that chief of staff role. But fortunately, because of the networking that's so important in establishing those relationships, building, maintaining those relationships, you can call upon people to help you make rain from time to time, because as you said, it changes, day to day, and then certainly sometimes, depending upon what's going on, hour to hour.
Absolutely, because this position can sometimes feel very, very isolated.
Yes.
And you can really feel like you're on your own island.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And what always kind of brings me back is the recognition that I am a part of a team. I don't have to operate in a silo. That I'm surrounded by people who usually have complementary knowledge and skill to mine. So just recognition that you have that circle and continuously grow that circle is really, really, it makes you all the more impactful and powerful, I think, in these roles.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I know you're doing a fantastic job. You had made a huge leap. You were in the southern region, and now you've moved um,
Almost to the West Coast. This is
okay,
considered
almost
the
to the
this
west.
is considered the Southwest, I
Okay.
believe. And it's been an interesting transition for sure. I absolutely love Phoenix. I moved here. This is a completely new world for me. I've always been a Southern girl. I'm still a Southern girl, just in a new place. But all of this has really coalesced into a really, really meaningful and impactful experience to me that I hope ultimately translates into the work that I do and the support that I lend to, our up and coming student leaders.
Yes. Ray, speak to our students or someone who is matriculating in the collegiate space as a student, whether they be undergraduate or graduate. As I share, one of the things that I have great respect for, if someone said, well, how would you describe Rae? I would say she's a great, analytical thinker, a great strategist. That's Wendy's interpretation of you or description of you. How would you describe yourself in terms of those key areas that have afforded you success throughout your career as a professional?
I think that number one would be probably I'm very, very organized. And I'm organized, but on the edges, there's a little fringe of tolerance for the messy because because
That's why we connect, because
sometimes I feel like I have to let loose, I have to just be me, and I can be so scattered sometimes, but it's not my normal. state. So you have to have really, really superior organizational skills because you're managing so many different things within this role. So my organizational skills have been really, really honed over the years of experiences that I've had. I wasn't always like this, for sure. You have to have a sense of humor because there's so much chaos and there's so much crisis and just really, really, hot button politically sensitive or just generally sensitive issues and information that you have to handle and be able to address with tact and dignity and just poise.
Sure.
With this position. So I think that I'm a very calm person. Generally, I try to be thoughtful and caring in my lens and perspective in addressing things. So organizational skills, caring approach, you have to be very emotionally intelligent and aware to be of service in this position. And just, I think it goes a long way to just be kind and to be nice and open-hearted and open to the possibilities as well.
I'm so glad you said that. I am always, struck when I talk to people or professionals in the public-private sector. It could be nonprofit, corporate, post-secondary education. And they start talking about just morale issues and, either people are so siloed and isolated and not necessarily because of the subject of their work or the level of responsibilities, but it's just the human interaction. And then when you start asking, you don't have to ask too many questions, but when you get to that third one and you start seeing a common thread, that people are just lacking civility. They're not being kind to one another and not understanding how that just permeates everything and in many ways can paralyze the organization. So I certainly appreciate you saying that. That is what I just said in terms of that expectation of how we should interact and behave is really so kindergarten. Isn't that what they taught us in kindergarten? I don't know how we missed it.
But ultimately, it always seems to come back to that, I think.
Yeah.
I think that the people who go the furthest and that who ultimately become the ones who are the most beloved to us and who are the most respected, there's always a little element of kindness within those people. I guess that philanthropic spirit, so to speak. You want to give back. You want to be known outside of just who you are as, Dr. Rae Borden or Dr. Wendy Wilson. You want to be known as more than that.
Sure. Yeah. And it again, I was on a Zoom a couple weeks ago, and this was probably maybe 40 people from all different post-secondary education spaces. And it was on, of all things, the topic was on mental health and wellness. And the host of the meeting had to ask everyone to turn their camera on. And what struck me about that, it was a plea almost, but I started thinking about it and I said that was as if she was speaking and trying to have a meeting or, an interaction with a group of individuals who had really turned their back on her. I know that it was not a deliberate or a conscious decision. We just, now because we're in this platform of Zoom or WebEx or whatever it is, we're going to multitask. So let me turn my camera off and do others. So I know it was not directed toward her, but it goes back to that civility piece about, how do you engage? How do you interact with something as simple as your camera being off? You're not present in the moment. So I love that you spoke or addressed it. That's absolutely essential to your role as chief of staff. You're in a key leadership role, and people are observing, watching, and taking copious notes
Yes.
how you interact and engage as a leader.
I mean, you're absolutely right, Wendy. That whole camera thing being on with Zoom. So at Arizona State, generally, when you are in a meeting, a virtual meeting, you're required to have your camera on.
Okay.
And I, at first, when I got here, that was, I don't know how I really felt about it, honestly, but what I've learned to appreciate that, because absent the ability to have you here in my office with me, and I'm looking at your expressions and looking at your posture and your body language and all those other cues that we can utilize in order to interpret information that we're receiving, there really is no other way to do that outside of having your camera on when you're in a virtual setting. It really is helpful. So I've really learned to be comfortable with it, and actually, I like it quite a bit now, because it
Yeah.
also gives me a reason to fix myself up again,
Right.
to start using my clothes, and just be able to start wearing my, glasses and all
Yes.
the different things that, reflects, allows people to reflect and understand who we are
Very
as a
good.
person. So,
Very good. Very good. Very good. Before we get ready to wrap up, I want to get two questions that I ask all of my guests. I did not give you the homework assignment, so give some thought to it before we delve into that.
all
Just put in the
right.
back of your head. One of the questions is, if you had the opportunity to invite three individuals to dinner, they can be still walking the earth, or they could have made their transition, no longer with us, kind of on an international, national scale, who would those individuals be? So think
Okay.
about that one. And then the next question is, what book outside of your preferred religious text do you find yourself going back to, or it just really impacted your life? What book would that be?
Okay.
But before you get to those, my question now is, if you could speak to those individuals who have some aspirations of entering the higher education space. Certainly, we have always a great need for instructors and faculties, but those that are wanting to enter into the leadership ranks, what advice would you give them in terms of their development, what they can expect, and how to remain visible in that space, all with the goal of making a difference?
Okay. So, who would I invite to dinner?
Oh, you're going to work backwards. Okay, you're ready for these questions.
Who would not precisely, but
You're fine. You're going to do fine.
who I would invite to dinner. At the top of my list to invite to dinner would be my grandmother,
Okay.
because she is just so funny and wise. I absolutely love talking to her about anything. So she would be one of the people that I would invite to my dinner. And part of the reason I would invite her too is because I know that she would enjoy talking with other people that I would invite to dinner.
Okay.
One of them would be Gail King.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't invite Oprah. I would invite Gail,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that Gail could potentially be more approachable, and she would have some really, really good insight from what I've read about her background and her experience and the work that she put into getting to where she is. I often find myself thinking about her journey and her path. And I just think that she has a lot to share and a lot to offer to women of color that are kind of up and coming in the ranks. I think that her story is really, really fascinating.
And now it's just hitting me. You and Gayle King have a slight resemblance. I don't know if you've heard
Oh
that
my
before.
gosh. No,
Yeah.
I've never heard
Okay.
that.
Yeah. I was like, oh,
I have never
okay,
heard that before.
neighbor. Okay. Go
But
ahead.
thanks, Wendy.
Good job.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. You're welcome.
Um, and who would the other person be that I would invite? It's probably, oh my goodness. Let me think about the third
Okay.
person I
Okay.
would
Tell me
invite.
about that book, though.
In terms of a book,
Mhm.
one of the books that I've read a few times, and I picked up on it like I think when I was in undergrad or either in my graduate program.
Mhm.
It was a book called The Argument Culture
Mhm.
by Deborah Tannen. And what that book basically assessed this almost constant and incessant need that we have to create conflict in
Mhm.
all aspects of life, that everything has to be kind of framed in terms of this them versus us mentality, so to speak,
Sure.
that there's always this element of conflict and why it does or does not have to be that way and how to work through those moments and those conversations. So
Interesting.
I frequently reference back to that book just because it's really all about how to dialogue and
Mhm.
how to have a conversation, no matter how difficult or easy it might be, and to do that without having to um, you know, be on a side
Yeah.
or to pick a side unless, certainly there are times when you have to, stand for something or you stand for nothing. But that's not always the case. Sometimes there really is a median point where you can compromise and everyone wins in a
Sure.
situation. So I like that lens of optimism and consideration. And then in terms of advice that I would give, it would probably be one of the things I always say to students when I'm speaking to them and others is that I've just learned to be okay with changing my mind and
Hmm.
to changing course because you have to be able to adjust and be flexible.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you're on one path and you may have been on that path for a really long time, and then you come to find out that that's not really where you want to be.
Mhm.
And when you have those moments and those epiphanies, and when you reach those crossroads, it's okay to change course. If it's, going to take you in a direction towards something that's going to make you happy and that's going to lead you to being your best self.
Sure.
And change can be really, really hard. And sometimes there are lots of reasons to believe that you can't change or that you can't go in a different direction. But I always keep in the back of my mind that, you know what, Rae, it's okay. You
Yeah.
can, it's okay. You've been doing this for a really long time, but you may have known for a really long time that this is not what you wanted to be doing and that
Sure.
you're not particularly happy with it. And that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that you're absolutely right. That is essentially important at any
It
stage of
really
your
is.
professional career, that you need to give yourself grace and permission to do sometimes a major shift or
Mm-hmm.
adjustment, where I think we have this great trepidation or reservation about, oh my gosh, can I do that? Is the concern and probably the overthinking of, but do I have the skills and the knowledge to then make that transition, discounting the reality of, all of the skills that you have been developing over the years, majority of the time, they are transferable. You may enter
Mm-hmm.
into a specialized space, but then you rely on that, special expertise or give yourself that learning curve to
Mm-hmm.
definitely get up to speed. But you reminded me of, I just read Deborah Lee's memoir, who is the former CEO of BET. And she talked about that each position that she held actually positioned her for the next. Never did she start off envisioning that I think she was an accounting major, and she wound up being the key or the lead executive of this huge enterprise that has had an international presence. But to your point, when she had to make those major shifts, she was able to do so because of the skills that she had developed in the previous roles, despite it being, wow, this is so foreign from what I originally imagined, but giving yourself permission to let me try it anyway. It's okay to change and adjust. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good, good. I'm so glad you shared that. Well, I'm honored to have you on the show. I'm just excited. I know we'll have to have you on for a part 2 to talk about what you do from day to day. I know you'll say, I'll probably come on every day then, because it changes from day to day. That's just that.
Absolutely. And I can definitely fill up a whole episode with just that.
Absolutely. I know you are doing an amazing job. Thank you. And you have certainly demonstrated to so many different people that it's okay to take the leap from the South to Arizona. Oh my gosh.
Drastic
you about
change.
that heat earlier, and just the whole shift in culture. But having that confidence that that you're going to be successful wherever you land. And so I wish you continued success. Please keep me apprised of the great things that you're doing at Arizona State University, and the impact that you're making, I know, in that community.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson. Again, I appreciate you inviting me here to have this conversation, and I look forward to the next.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. Right. Viewers, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of Realizing Potential. I'm Wendy Wilson, and I look forward to seeing you next time.